Hello everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The day I cried in a supermarket. Imagine standing in the middle of a brightly lit American supermarket, holding a box of cereal you don't even want. While tears roll down your face, and not because someone died, but because a teenage cashier just asked you how are you today, and you froze. Like a computer that suddenly forgot how to process human language. That was me. That was my third month in the United States. And that was the exact moment I realized I didn't understand American culture. Not even a little bit. You see, I had studied English for years back in my home country. I memorized vocabulary lists, I aced grammar tests, I could write a decent essay about climate change or economic policies. But no textbook ever taught me why Americans smile when they feel sad, or why they say we should hang out sometime and then never call you. Or why my husband's mother hugged me on the first meeting and then didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, and that was normal. My name is Lena, and this is not a video about perfect pronunciation or advanced idioms. This is a true story about how I almost destroyed my marriage, confused my own children, and lost myself in a culture I thought I was ready for, all because I didn't understand the invisible rules of American life. And it all started with a simple question that broke me. Are you okay? Let me rewind a little, but not too far, because I'm not going to bore you with my immigration journey. No. I want to talk about what happened after I already had a green card, after I was already married to my American husband. After I already had 2 kids who spoke English like little native speakers. I was living the so-called American dream, except I was crying in my car before every parent-teacher conference. I was silent at dinner parties because I was terrified of saying I'm fine when I wasn't, or saying I'm not fine when Americans expected me to lie. Sound familiar? If you're watching this and you've ever felt like an alien in a country where you're supposed to belong, stay with me. Because this video is slow English practice, yes, but more than that, it's a permission slip to be confused, to mess up. And to finally understand that American culture isn't about acting like an American. It's about learning to be yourself in a language that feels foreign to your soul. So let me take you back to that supermarket. It was a Tuesday. Rainy. I had just dropped my daughter Lily off at kindergarten, and I needed to buy chicken broth because my husband had a cold. Simple, right? Except when I got to the checkout, the cashier, a girl maybe 19, with purple hair and a nose ring, looked at me and said, "Hey. How's it going?" And my brain short-circuited. Because in my culture, when someone asks how you're doing, they actually want to know. You tell them about your sick husband, your tired feet, your worry about money. But I had learned by then that Americans don't really want that. They want a quick good, you? So I tried. I opened my mouth and said good, you? But my voice came out weird. Too high. Too slow. The cashier smiled, that huge, teeth-showing American smile, and said, "That's awesome. Have a great day." And I just stood there. The box of cereal in my hand wasn't even mine. I had picked it up from a shelf because I didn't know where to put my hands. The person behind me coughed. The cashier looked at me again, and this time her smile faded just a little. She said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And that was it. That was the question that broke the dam. Because I was not okay. I hadn't been okay for months. I was lonely. I was scared. I missed my mother's voice. I hated that I couldn't make small talk without sweating. I hated that my husband's friends laughed at my jokes 1 second and then ignored me the next, not because they were mean, but because they didn't know how to include someone who spoke so slowly. So I cried. Right there, in front of the granola bars and the discounted Halloween candy. I cried like a child. The cashier panicked. She called her manager. Someone handed me a tissue. An old man patted my shoulder and said, "Honey, we've all been there." But had he? Had he really been a foreign woman trying to figure out why Americans say, "Let's get coffee," when they mean, "Let's never see each other again"? Probably not. But here's what I learned that day, and this is the most important part for anyone trying to learn English through stories. The shame I felt wasn't because my English was bad. My English was actually fine. I could order food, ask for directions, even argue about a bill. The shame came from expecting myself to understand a culture without ever being taught its hidden language. And that hidden language isn't about words. It's about rhythm. It's about knowing when to be loud and when to be quiet. It's about understanding that we should do this again sometime is often a goodbye, not a promise. So after that supermarket meltdown, I went home, sat on my kitchen floor, and called my husband. I said, "I need help. Not with grammar. With America." And that phone call changed everything. Because for the first time, I stopped pretending to be a confident immigrant who had it all figured out. I admitted that I was a beginner, not in English, but in being American. And that admission, that tiny crack in my armor, is what finally let the light in. In the next sections, I'm going to tell you about the fights, the laughs, the humiliating moments, and the small miracles that helped me understand American culture through my own story, my love story, my parenting story, my messy, beautiful, imperfect life. But for now, I want you to ask yourself, have you ever cried in a place where no one understood why? If yes, you're not alone. And you're not failing. You're just learning a culture the hard way, the real way. So take a slow breath. Press play on the next part. And let's practice slow English together, one confused, honest, hilarious moment at a time. Are you okay? A question that broke me. Now, you might think that crying in a supermarket was my lowest point, but no, the real breaking moment came 3 days later when my neighbor, a friendly woman named Carol who always waved from her driveway, knocked on my door with a plate of brownies and asked me that same deadly question. Are you okay? And this time, I decided to be honest. Not dramatic, not desperate, just honest. I said, "No, Carol, I'm not okay. I feel lonely. I miss my family. I don't understand why everyone here says they want to be friends but nobody ever actually calls." I said it slowly, carefully, using the simple English I had practiced 100 times in my head. And you know what Carol did? She smiled, that tight, polite, slightly panicked American smile, patted my hand, said, "Oh, honey, it will get better," and then walked back to her house and never spoke to me again. Not a text. Not a wave. Nothing. For 3 months. I didn't understand what had happened until my husband explained it to me that night. He said, "Lena, in America, when someone asks are you okay? They don't actually want to know. It's a greeting. It's like hello. The correct answer is I'm fine, thanks, even if your house is on fire. Especially if your house is on fire." I stared at him. "So you want me to lie?" He sighed. "I want you to play the game." That was the moment I realized that American politeness is not about truth. It's about speed. It's about keeping the surface smooth so nobody has to feel uncomfortable. And I had broken that surface. I had taken a casual, 5-second social ritual and turned it into a therapy session. In Carol's eyes, I wasn't being authentic, I was being needy. I was being a burden. And that terrified her, not because she was a bad person, but because American culture has a very clear rule: you deal with your own problems. You pay a professional to listen, and you never, ever dump your emotions on a neighbor holding brownies. I wish I was exaggerating, but this is where my slow English practice actually began, not with textbooks, but with learning to translate not just words, but intentions. Because back in my home culture, when someone asked, "Are you okay?" it was an invitation. A doorway. A signal that they had time to listen. In America, it's the opposite. It's a test. And if you fail, if you say anything other than "good," or "I'm fine, thanks," you get labeled as too much. Too emotional. Too foreign. Too weird. I learned this lesson again and again over the next few months. At my daughter's school, the teacher asked me, "How are you doing, Mrs. Chen?" And I said, "Honestly, I'm tired. My son didn't sleep well." The teacher's smile froze. She stepped back half a step, I measured it, and then she said, "Well, I hope you get some rest," and walked away. Later, I found out from another mom that the teacher had told the principal I seemed struggling and maybe needed a social worker. All because I said I was tired. Tired. In America, tired is not a feeling, it's a red flag. You say I'm tired and people think you're depressed. You say I'm sad and they think you're suicidal. You say I'm lonely and they think you're dangerous. So what do you say? You say I'm great. With an exclamation point in your voice. You say living the dream, even if the dream is a nightmare. You say can't complain. Which is a lie, because you absolutely can complain, you just choose not to. And here's the beautiful, painful irony: once I started lying about how I felt, people started liking me. The moms at school invited me to coffee. Carol started waving again. My husband's boss told him I was so pleasant. I was pleasant because I had finally learned to say fine with a smile, even when my insides were screaming. But that didn't fix anything. It just painted over the cracks. And the cracks got deeper. Because every time I said I'm fine when I wasn't, I felt a little more invisible. A little more fake. A little more angry at this country that demanded my happiness but refused to hold my pain. The turning point came 6 months later, when my son Jake, who was 4 at the time, fell off his bike and scraped his knee. He was crying, real tears, real blood. And a neighbor ran over and said, "Hey buddy, are you okay?" And Jake, my little American-born son, stopped crying instantly, wiped his face, and said, "I'm fine." Then he looked at me with wet eyes and whispered, "Mommy, it hurts." But he didn't say it to the neighbor. He had already learned the rule. That broke my heart more than anything. So I sat down on the sidewalk, pulled him into my lap, and I said, "You don't have to be fine. You can say I'm hurt or I need help. That's not wrong. That's brave." He looked confused. "But everyone says I'm fine," he said. And I realized that I had been teaching him, without words, to hide. To perform. To survive by shrinking. And I didn't want that for him. I didn't want that for myself. So I made a decision that night: I would stop playing the "Are you okay?" game. Not by dumping my trauma on strangers, but by learning a new way to answer. A way that was honest without being heavy. A way that respected American culture without betraying my own. For example, instead of I'm fine when I was exhausted, I started saying I've been better, but I'll be okay. That worked. Instead of I'm sad, I said it's been a tough week, thanks for asking. That worked too. Americans, I learned, don't hate honesty, they hate long answers. They hate emotional labor from strangers. They want a one-sentence update, not a story. And once I gave them that, a tiny crack of truth without the flood, they actually leaned in. Carol came back. Not with brownies, but with a simple glad you're doing better, Lena. And for the first time, I felt seen without feeling exposed. That's the secret that no ESL textbook will teach you. The question "Are you okay?" in America is not a door, it's a window. You can look through it, but you're not supposed to climb out. You wave. You smile. You say I'm getting there. And then you go home and call someone who actually loves you. That's not lying. That's cultural fluency. And in the next section, I'll tell you how my husband laughed when I said sorry 50 times in one conversation, and why that laugh saved my marriage. My husband laughed when I said sorry 50 times. You know what's more embarrassing than crying in a supermarket? Having your own husband time you. And that's exactly what Mark did one rainy Sunday afternoon. He pulled out his phone, opened the stopwatch, and said, "Go ahead, Lena, just live normally." I had no idea what he was doing. I was making coffee, bumping into the kitchen island, nearly dropping a spoon, and with every tiny mistake, I said it, sorry. I spilled a drop of milk. Sorry. I walked in front of him to get a cup. Sorry. He handed me the sugar without me asking. Sorry. By the time I sat down, he stopped the timer and showed me the screen. 12 minutes. 52 apologies. 52 times I had said sorry for absolutely nothing. And then he laughed, not a mean laugh, but a deep, confused, can you hear yourself laugh, and said, "Babe, do you think you're committing a crime every time you exist?" I wanted to be angry, but I couldn't, because he was right. I was apologizing for taking up space. For needing things. For being seen. And that, right there, was the most American lesson I never saw coming. In the United States, saying sorry too much doesn't make you polite. It makes you weak. It makes people uncomfortable. It signals that you think you're a burden, and Americans, for all their flaws, hate nothing more than a person who believes they're a burden. Let me explain. Back in my home culture, apologizing was a form of respect. You said sorry before asking a question. You said sorry when you entered a room. You said sorry if someone else bumped into you. It was a rhythm, a dance, a way of saying I see you, I don't want to offend you, please don't hate me. But in America, my husband explained, sorry is reserved for actual harm. You say it if you break something, hurt someone, or make a real mistake. You do not say it for existing. You do not say it for having an opinion. And you absolutely do not say it for saying no. The first time I tried to say no without apologizing, I thought I was going to pass out. Mark's mother, Diane, had invited us to dinner at a restaurant I hated, loud, crowded, terrible lighting. And Mark said, just tell her you don't want to go. My hands were sweating. I can't, I whispered. I'll hurt her feelings. You won't, he said. Just say no thank you, that doesn't work for me. No sorry. So I called Diane. My heart was pounding. I said, hi Diane, thank you for the invitation, but that restaurant doesn't work for me. Can we try somewhere else? There was a pause. A long, terrifying pause. And then she said, "Oh. Okay. How about Italian?" That was it. No drama. No guilt. No silent treatment. She didn't hate me. She didn't even seem mildly annoyed. She just adjusted. I hung up and stared at Mark like he had performed magic. "That's it?" I said. "That's it," he said. "Welcome to America, where no is a complete sentence." But changing my sorry habit wasn't that easy. Because it wasn't just a word, it was a shield. Every time I said sorry, I was protecting myself from the possibility that someone might be angry at me. And without that shield, I felt naked. Exposed. Like I was walking through a crowded room with no clothes on. The real breakthrough came during a parent-teacher conference for my son Jake. The teacher mentioned that Jake was quiet in class, not shy, just quiet. And my immediate, automatic response was, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll talk to him. I'm sorry he's like that." The teacher looked at me like I had sprouted a second head. "Mrs. Chen," she said slowly, "there's nothing to be sorry about. Some kids are quiet. It's not a problem." But I couldn't stop. "Sorry, I didn't mean to make it sound like a problem. Sorry. I just want him to be more confident. Sorry." The teacher actually laughed, kindly, and said, "You know, in America, when you apologize too much, it makes people feel like they have to take care of you. And that's exhausting." That sentence hit me like a truck. Exhausting. I had spent my whole life thinking I was being humble, gracious, easy to be around. But I was actually making everyone else carry my anxiety. Every sorry was a tiny rope tying them to my insecurity. No wonder people kept their distance. No wonder Carol ran away. No wonder the moms at school invited me once and then never again. I wasn't being polite, I was being emotionally loud. And Americans, who value independence above almost everything, don't know how to respond to loud insecurity except by backing away slowly. So I decided to experiment. For 1 week, I would only say sorry if I had actually done something wrong, broken an object, hurt someone, made a real mistake. I would not say it for bumping into furniture, or asking a question, or taking the last cookie. The first day was agony. I bumped my elbow on the doorframe and literally bit my tongue to stop the sorry from escaping. Mark watched me with amusement. "You look like you're in pain," he said. "I am," I said. "It feels rude." "It's not rude," he said. "It's normal." By day 3, something strange happened. I noticed that when I didn't apologize, people didn't get angry. They just continued. "The woman at the grocery store whose cart almost hit mine?" I said excuse me instead of sorry. She smiled and moved. "The man who held the elevator for me?" I said thank you instead of sorry for making you wait. He said no problem. My own children? When I stopped apologizing for saying no to candy before dinner, they whined for 2 minutes and then moved on. Nothing exploded. No one hated me. And I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years, light. Like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Because every unnecessary sorry had been a small confession, I don't deserve to take up space. And once I stopped confessing, I started believing, just a little, that maybe I did deserve to take up space. Maybe my presence wasn't an inconvenience. Maybe I could exist without permission. The biggest test came when Mark and I had our first real argument after that week. He forgot to pick up Jake from soccer practice. I was furious. And my old self would have said, "I'm sorry, but can you please remember next time?" Apologizing for even having anger. But instead, I took a breath and said, "Mark, I'm not sorry. You forgot our son. That's not okay." He blinked. Then he said, "You're right. I'm sorry." He apologized. Not me. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't swallow my feelings to make him comfortable. And you know what? He respected me more for it. That night, he told me, "I married a woman who apologizes for breathing. But tonight, I saw someone else. Don't lose her." That's when I understood that American culture, for all its confusing rules, has one beautiful gift. It rewards people who take up honest space. Not arrogant space. Not aggressive space. Just honest space. And learning to drop the fake sorry was the first real step I took toward becoming myself in this country. In the next section, I'll tell you about the silent war at the dinner table, the fight with my mother-in-law that almost tore our family apart. And the one quiet sentence that fixed everything. The silent war at dinner table. You haven't seen tension until you've watched a mother-in-law and a foreign daughter-in-law silently battle over a casserole dish. My mother-in-law Diane is a wonderful woman, kind, generous, the type who sends birthday cards 2 weeks early. But she also has a way of making requests that sound like commands wrapped in velvet. "Lena, dear, would you mind bringing a salad on Thursday?" Means you are bringing a salad, and it better be good. "Oh, don't you think the kids would love a haircut?" Means their hair looks like a disaster, and I'm judging you. For the first 2 years of my marriage, I said yes to everything. Yes to the salad. Yes to the haircut. Yes to hosting Thanksgiving even though I had never cooked a turkey. Yes to driving 2 hours to her house every single Sunday even though my kids were exhausted. And every time I said yes, I felt a small piece of myself disappear. But I couldn't say no. Because in my culture, saying no to an older family member is unthinkable. It's disrespectful. It's selfish. It's the kind of thing that gets you whispered about for decades. So I smiled, I nodded, and I secretly hated Diane. I hated her for asking. I hated myself for agreeing. And the resentment grew like mold under a rug, invisible but toxic. The silent war happened every Sunday at her dinner table. Diane would make comments. Little ones. "Oh, you're not eating much, Lena. Is my cooking not good?" I would say, "No, it's delicious, I'm just full." But what I meant was, "I'm so anxious I can't swallow." Then she would say, "You know, Jake told me you let him watch TV before homework." We never did that. I would say, "Oh, I'll be stricter." But what I meant was, mind your own business. Mark sat there, oblivious, eating his mashed potatoes, completely missing the knives flying over his head. I couldn't blame him. He grew up in a family where people said what they meant. If Diane had a problem, she would just say it. But she wasn't saying it, she was hinting. And I wasn't responding to hints. I was absorbing them. The explosion finally came on a Sunday in October. Diane had invited her sister, Aunt Pat, to dinner, a woman who talked even more than Diane. And Aunt Pat looked at my daughter Lily's dress and said, "Oh, what a cute outfit. Didn't you wear that last month, sweetheart?" Lily, being 6, said, "Yes, it's my favorite." And Aunt Pat laughed and said, well, maybe mommy can buy you a new one soon. I felt my face get hot. Diane added, Lily's been wearing the same 3 dresses for months. I offered to take her shopping, but Lena said she was busy. That was a lie. Diane had offered once, 6 months ago, and I had said maybe later, not no. But in Diane's mind, maybe later meant I don't care about my daughter's clothes. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but nothing came out. Because I had spent so many years swallowing my voice that my throat forgot how to release words. So I did what I always did, I smiled, I nodded, and I cried in the car on the way home. Mark finally noticed. He said, "What's wrong?" And I exploded. "Your mother is killing me," I said. Every Sunday, she criticizes everything I do. How I parent, how I dress the kids, how I cook. And you don't say anything. You just eat. Mark looked genuinely confused. "She's not criticizing you," he said. "She's just making conversation." "That's how she is." "That's how she is?" I yelled. "Well, this is how I am. I am a person who can't hear those comments without bleeding." That night, Mark called his mother. I didn't ask him to. But he did. And he said, "Mom, Lena feels attacked at dinner. Can you ease up on the suggestions?" Diane was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I was just trying to help. I didn't know." The next Sunday, she didn't make a single comment about the kids' clothes, the food, or anything. She was awkwardly quiet. And that was worse. Because now I felt guilty. She had stopped talking, and I had become the villain who silenced sweet old Diane. I couldn't win. Either I suffered in silence, or I spoke up and became the difficult foreign daughter-in-law. That's when I realized the real problem wasn't Diane. The real problem was that I had never learned to say a simple, calm, American no. Not a screaming no. Not an apologetic no. Just a normal, boundary-setting, I love you but not today no. So I practiced. In front of the mirror. In the car. I would say, "Thank you for the suggestion, but we're fine with how things are." I would say, "I appreciate that, but I've got it covered." I would say, "No, thank you." Just that. No explanation. No justification. No sorry. The next time Diane said, "Oh, wouldn't it be nice if Lily took piano lessons?" I took a breath, looked her in the eye, and said, "Thank you for thinking of her, Diane. But we're not doing piano right now." She blinked. "Oh. Okay. Just a thought." And then she moved on. No argument. No silent treatment. No drama. I couldn't believe it. All those months of resentment, all those tears, all that silent war, and the solution was just saying no. Politely. Firmly. Without apology. That was the American way I had never understood. In my culture, saying no to an elder is an act of war. But in American culture, at least in Diane's world, saying no is just information. It's not rejection. It's not disrespect. It's simply a boundary. And boundaries, I learned, are not walls. They are doors that you get to open and close. The real turning point came on Thanksgiving. Diane asked me to host 20 people. A 15-pound turkey. I wanted to say yes to make her happy. But instead, I said, "Diane, I'm not ready to host that many people. But I'll bring dessert and help you clean up." She paused. Then she smiled, a real smile, not the polite one, and said, "You know what? That would be wonderful. I actually love hosting." And just like that, the war ended. Not because we became best friends, but because I finally understood that American family culture runs on clear, kind, honest communication, not on guessing games and hidden resentments. Diane wasn't a villain. She was just an American mom who expressed love through suggestions. And I wasn't weak. I was just a foreign daughter-in-law who needed to learn a new language of boundaries. That dinner table is quiet now, not the tense quiet, but the comfortable quiet of people who have figured each other out. And every time I say no thank you without flinching, I feel a little more like I belong. In the next section, I'll tell you why Americans smile too much, and how my daughter's kindergarten class taught me the difference between fake happiness and real resilience. Why Americans smile too much and I thought they were fake. For the first 3 years in America, I was convinced that every smiling person was either lying or selling something. The barista who grinned while handing me a burnt coffee? Fake. The UPS driver who beamed like he just won the lottery? Fake. My own mother-in-law who smiled through every passive-aggressive comment? Definitely fake. I came from a culture where you smile when you're happy, genuinely, deeply, can't help it happy. You don't smile at strangers. You don't smile when you're sad. And you absolutely don't smile when you're angry, because that's called being two-faced. So when I moved to the United States and saw everyone smiling everywhere, in elevators, at parking lots, during funerals, yes. I saw it once, I thought, these people are either hypocrites or robots. I told Mark this one night. I said, your country is so fake. Everyone smiles, but nobody actually cares. He thought about it for a minute and said, you know, we're not faking. We're just practicing. Practicing? What kind of culture practices happiness? That made no sense to me. Until my daughter Lily came home from kindergarten one day with a drawing. It was a stick figure of our family under a yellow sun, and everyone had enormous crescent moon smiles. But Lily had drawn something else too, a small gray cloud above her own head. I asked her, sweetie, why is there a cloud? She said, because I felt sad at recess. But I smiled anyway, because that's what we're supposed to do. My heart cracked. Here was my 6-year-old, already learning to perform happiness for the outside world. I wanted to tell her, no, don't smile if you're sad. That's dishonest. But then I remembered my own experience. When I had answered I'm not okay to Carol, she ran away. When I had cried in the supermarket, people panicked. The truth was, American culture doesn't reject sadness, it just doesn't know what to do with it in public. So the smile isn't a lie. It's a signal. It says, I'm managing. You don't have to rescue me. The breakthrough came when I volunteered in Lily's classroom for the first time. Her teacher, Ms. Rachel, was the smileiest person I had ever met. Every morning, she greeted 20 kids with a huge grin and a cheerful good morning, superstars. I assumed she was either on medication or pretending. But one day, I arrived early and saw Miss Rachel sitting alone in the classroom, head down, shoulders shaking. She was crying. Quietly. Into a tissue. I froze. I didn't know whether to leave or comfort her. But before I could decide, she looked up, saw me, and instantly, the smile came back. Lena. Hi. I'm so sorry, just allergies. I knew it wasn't allergies. But I also knew she didn't want me to ask. So I didn't. I just smiled back and said, no problem. 5 minutes later, she was greeting the kids with that same giant grin, reading stories, singing songs. And the kids were happy. They didn't know their teacher had been crying. They just knew they felt safe. That afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about Ms. Rachel. In my culture, if a teacher cried, the whole village would gather around her. We would bring food, ask questions, share her pain. But here, Ms. Rachel had chosen to cry alone. Was that sad? Or was it respectful? Because her job was to take care of 20 small humans. And if she had walked into that classroom with red eyes and a trembling voice, those kids would have felt scared. Not because they're weak, but because children look to adults for stability. So she smiled not to be fake, but to be strong. To protect them. That was the first time I started to understand the American smile differently. It's not always about happiness. Sometimes it's about resilience. Sometimes it's about saying, I will not dump my problems on you right now. The next week, I had my own test. I had a terrible morning. Jake threw up, I spilled coffee on my work shirt, and I got a call that my mother was sick back home. I was a mess. But I had to take Lily to school. So I put on a clean shirt, brushed my hair, and walked into the kindergarten building. A mom I barely knew smiled at me and said, Hey Lena. How's it going? Every cell in my body wanted to say, terrible. Everything is terrible. But I thought of Ms. Rachel. I took a breath, smiled back, and said, oh, busy morning. But we're hanging in there. She laughed and said, same here, girl. Same here. And then she walked away. That was it. No burden. No awkwardness. Just two humans acknowledging that life is hard without unpacking their suitcases in the hallway. I realized then that the American smile is a kind of grammar. It has rules. You smile when you enter a room to say I come in peace. You smile when you pass someone on the street to say I see you, and you're not a threat. You smile when you're struggling to say I'm not asking you to fix me. And once I learned that grammar, I stopped feeling fake. I started feeling considerate. Because smiling when you're not happy isn't lying. It's choosing not to spread your pain like wildfire. That doesn't mean you never share your pain. Of course you do, with your partner, your close friends, your therapist. But you don't share it with the barista. You don't share it with the mom at pickup. You save it for people who signed up for it. The real turning point came when my mother visited from overseas. She saw me smile at a neighbor who had just insulted me, accidentally, I think. After the neighbor left, my mother grabbed my arm and said, why did you smile at her? She was horrible to you. I explained, Mom, in America, smiling doesn't mean I like you. Sometimes it means I'm too busy for your drama. She didn't believe me. So I showed her. The next time the neighbor made a passive comment about my garden being messy, I smiled extra wide and said, thanks for noticing. I'll get to it when I can. Then I turned around and walked away. My mother stared at me like I had grown wings. That's it, she said. That's it, I said. You didn't fight? Fighting would have cost me an hour of my life. Smiling cost me 1 second. That's when my mother finally understood. And that's when I finally understood too. The American smile is not a mask. It's a tool. It's a way of saying, I have boundaries, and they are made of politeness, not walls. Now, I smile more than I used to. Not because I'm happier, life still has its storms. But because I've learned that a smile can be armor. It can be a pause button. It can be the difference between a bad day becoming a bad week. The kids at Lily's school don't know that I sometimes cry in my car before pickup. They just know that when I walk through that door, I smile. And that smile tells them, you are safe. You don't have to carry my weight. That's not fake. That's love in American grammar. In the next section, I'll tell you about the time I almost got fired for saying I'm fine, and why honesty at work almost cost me everything. Told my boss I'm fine, and almost got fired. You would think that after all my lessons about honesty and boundaries, I would have figured out how to talk to my boss. But no. The workplace almost destroyed me. And it happened because of two little words that I thought were finally safe, I'm fine. Let me back up. After 2 years of staying home with the kids, I decided to go back to work. Nothing fancy, just a part-time administrative job at a small marketing firm. I answered emails, scheduled meetings, organized files. Easy English. Safe English. Or so I thought. My boss was a woman named Karen. And before you laugh, yes, her name was actually Karen, but she was nothing like the meme. She was sharp, efficient, and surprisingly kind. She also had a habit of asking me the same question every morning. How are you doing, Lena? And by then, I had mastered the American answer. I would smile and say, I'm fine, thanks. How are you? Perfect. Textbook. Karen would smile back and move on. For 6 months, this worked. Until the week everything fell apart. Jake got the flu. Lily was having nightmares. Mark was traveling for work. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night for 8 days. And on top of that, I had made a mistake at work, a small one, but embarrassing. I had sent an email to the wrong client. Karen called me into her office. She closed the door. She sat down across from me and said, Lena, that email was a problem. Can you tell me what happened? My heart was pounding. In my home culture, when a boss asks what happened, you apologize profusely, promise to do better, and hope they don't fire you. You do not explain. You do not share your personal struggles. You just say I'm sorry and I'm fine and disappear. So that's what I did. I said, I'm so sorry, Karen. It won't happen again. I'm fine. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, Lena, I didn't ask if you were fine. I asked what happened. This is the 3rd small mistake this month. That's not like you. Is something going on? I panicked. Because in my mind, telling a boss about my personal life was unprofessional. Weak. Dangerous. So I doubled down. I'm fine, I said. Really? Just tired. I'll fix it. Karen's face changed. Her kindness hardened into something colder. She said, okay. Then I need you to be more careful. This is a warning. I walked out of her office shaking. I had survived. But I hadn't. Because over the next 2 weeks, my performance got worse. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I was so anxious about making another mistake that I started making even more. And every time Karen asked, are you okay? I said, I'm fine. Finally, on a Friday afternoon, she called me into her office again. This time, there was an HR person sitting there. My blood went cold. Karen said, "Lena, we've noticed a decline in your work. You've missed deadlines. You've been short with clients. And when I've asked you what's wrong, you've told me you're fine. But you're clearly not fine. So I need you to be honest with me right now, or I'm going to have to put you on a performance improvement plan." Which is the first step toward termination. Termination. That word hit me like a slap. I was about to lose my job because I had said I'm fine too many times. In my culture, I'm fine protects you. In American work culture, I'm fine when you're not fine is a red flag. It says, I don't trust you. It says, I can't communicate. It says, I'm hiding something. And American bosses, especially good ones, hate that. Because they can't help you if you won't tell them what's wrong. I sat there, tears burning my eyes. And for the first time in my professional life, I decided to tell the truth. Not the whole truth, I didn't cry or dump everything. But I said, "Karen, I'm not fine. My son was sick for 2 weeks. My husband was traveling. I haven't slept. And I was afraid that if I told you, you would think I was weak or making excuses." Karen's face softened again. She leaned forward and said, "Lena, why would I think that? You've been one of my most reliable employees. Everyone has hard seasons. That's life. But I can't read your mind. When you say I'm fine, I believe you. And then when the mistakes keep coming, I think you just don't care." I blinked. "You thought I didn't care? What else was I supposed to think?" she said. "You told me you were fine." That was the moment I understood the biggest cultural difference between American workplaces and everything I had known. In my home culture, you hide your struggles to protect your boss. You don't want to burden them. You suffer silently, and that's considered strong. But in America, hiding your struggles isn't strength, it's a communication failure. American bosses don't want you to be a robot. They want you to say, "Hey, I'm underwater this week. Can we adjust some deadlines? Or I made a mistake because I'm exhausted. Here's how I'll fix it." That's not weakness. That's professionalism. Because a team that hides problems is a team that fails. A team that names problems is a team that solves them. Karen didn't fire me. Instead, she gave me 3 days off. She told me to rest, to take care of my family, and to come back when I could breathe. She also said, "From now on, when I ask how you are, don't say fine unless you actually mean it. Say, I'm struggling but managing, or I need help with X, or even I don't want to talk about it right now. Just don't lie to me. Because when you lie, you take away my ability to support you." I went home and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. For years, I had believed that admitting struggle was admitting failure. But Karen taught me the opposite. In America, admitting struggle is how you get help. And asking for help isn't shameful. It's how you survive. After that day, I changed my work vocabulary. I stopped saying I'm fine as a shield. I started saying things like I'm having a rough morning, but I'll get through it, or I need an extra day on that report because I'm overwhelmed. And you know what happened? My coworkers didn't judge me. They nodded. They said, "Same, girl." They offered to help. My performance improved. Karen trusted me more, not less. Because she knew that when I said I've got it, I meant it. And when I said I need help, I wasn't crying wolf. That's the American workplace secret that no business English course taught me. vulnerability is not a liability. It's a tool for building trust. But only if you use it correctly, briefly, professionally, and with a solution in mind. You don't dump your whole life story on your boss. But you also don't lock everything inside until you break. You find the middle path. You say, here's the problem. Here's what I need. Here's how I'll fix the rest. That's not weakness. That's leadership of your own life. A year later, Karen promoted me. She said, "You're one of the most honest people on my team now." I laughed. "I used to be the most dishonest," I said. "You just didn't know it." She laughed too. And in that laugh, I felt something I had never felt at work before, belonging. Not because I had become American, but because I had finally learned to stop hiding. In the next section, I'll tell you what my daughter asked me that made me cry harder than anything. "Mom, why don't you have dreams?" And how that question changed everything about how I see myself. My daughter asked, "Mom, why don't you have dreams?" The question came out of nowhere, like a tiny arrow dipped in truth. Lily was 7, sitting on the kitchen floor with her crayons scattered around her like fallen leaves. She was drawing a picture of our family, again, but this time she had added something new, a big blank space next to me. I asked her, "Sweetie, what's that empty spot?" She looked up with those big brown eyes and said, "That's where your dreams are supposed to go, Mom." "But you don't have any," so I left it blank. I laughed. A nervous, too high laugh. "Of course I have dreams," I said. "Like what?" she asked. And I froze. Because in my head, I had dreams, but they were all about other people. I dreamed that Jake would stop getting sick. I dreamed that Lily would be happy at school. I dreamed that Mark would come home earlier. I dreamed that my mother would stay healthy. But when I tried to think of a dream that was just for me, not for my husband, not for my kids, not for anyone else, there was nothing. Just that blank space. Lily went back to her drawing, satisfied that she had asked her question. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. When did I stop having my own dreams? Or had I ever had them? Back in my home country, before marriage, I had wanted to be a teacher. I loved the idea of standing in front of a classroom, helping kids understand the world. But then I moved to America, and my English wasn't good enough to teach. So I put that dream in a box and buried it. Then I became a mom, and all my energy went into keeping tiny humans alive. Then I became a wife, and I spent years learning how to be a good American partner, how to communicate, how to set boundaries, how to smile at the right times. Somewhere along the way, I stopped asking myself what I wanted. I was so busy surviving that I forgot to live. That night, I told Mark about Lily's question. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She's not wrong, you know. When we first met, you had fire. You talked about opening a little cafe, or writing a book about your experiences. What happened to that?" I stared at him. I said those things? "You said a lot of things," he said. "But then you got scared. You said your English wasn't good enough. You said you didn't know American business culture. You said maybe later." And later never came. He was right. I had slowly, quietly, murdered my own dreams with the weapon of not yet. And the worst part? I had convinced myself that being a good mother meant sacrificing everything. That a woman with dreams was selfish. That my only job was to support everyone else until they flew, and then maybe, if there was time left, I could pick up the scraps. But Lily's blank space wouldn't leave my mind. A few days later, I was volunteering at her school book fair. A mom named Sarah, one of those put-together women who always seemed to have extra energy, was helping me stack paperbacks. I asked her, "How do you do it?" "Work, kids, exercise, hobbies. You seem to have it all." She laughed. "Oh, I don't have it all. But I have one rule: every day, I do one thing that's just for me. Even if it's only 10 minutes. Even if it's just reading a chapter of a book or calling a friend. That 10 minutes reminds me that I'm not just a mom. I'm still a person." That sentence hit me harder than anything Karen had ever said. I'm not just a mom. I'm still a person. I had forgotten that. I had become so identified with my roles, wife, mother, daughter, employee, that I had erased the person underneath. So I decided to try Sarah's rule. Every day, 10 minutes for me. The first week was ridiculous. I didn't even know what I liked anymore. I sat on the couch for 10 minutes, staring at the wall, feeling guilty. I tried listening to music, but I didn't know any new artists. I tried drawing, but Lily's crayons felt like hers, not mine. I tried writing, but every sentence I wrote was about someone else. Then, on the 8th day, I found something. A podcast about storytelling. Not English lessons, not parenting advice, just people telling true stories about their lives. I listened for 10 minutes, and for the first time in years, I felt something stir. A tiny flicker. I wanted to tell my own story. Not to be famous. Not to make money. Just to say, this happened to me, and maybe someone else needs to hear it. That's when I realized that dreams don't have to be big. They don't have to be a business or a book or a career change. A dream can be as small as I want to finish one short story by the end of the year. Or I want to learn to play 3 songs on the piano. Or I want to take a walk by myself every Sunday without feeling guilty. The problem wasn't that I had no dreams. The problem was that I thought dreams had to be enormous to count. So I started small. I told Mark, on Saturday mornings, I'm going to the coffee shop alone for 1 hour. You have the kids. He said, okay. Just like that. No guilt trip, no negotiation. I went to the coffee shop with a notebook. I wrote down memories, the supermarket cry, the dinner table war, the smile lesson. I filled 3 pages. They weren't good. The grammar was messy, the sentences were choppy. But they were mine. A month later, Lily came home with another drawing. This time, the blank space next to me was filled with a tiny, colorful scribble. I asked her, "What's that?" She said, "That's your dream, Mom. It's small now, but it's growing." I cried. Not the sad cry from the supermarket. A different cry. The kind that comes when someone sees you, really sees you, and doesn't look away. That night, I sat down with Lily and said, "You were right. I didn't have dreams. But I'm finding them now." She smiled that big, uncomplicated American smile, and said, "Good. Because when you have dreams, I have dreams too." That was the most important lesson my daughter ever taught me. Children don't learn from what you say. They learn from what you do. If I live a small, shrinking life, they will learn to shrink. But if I chase my tiny, messy, imperfect dreams, even if I fail, they will learn that dreams are worth having. So I kept going to the coffee shop. I kept writing. I started recording my voice, reading my stories out loud, practicing my slow English not for a test, but for myself. And slowly, the blank space filled. Not with a bestseller or a business. Just with a woman who finally remembered that she existed outside of everyone else's needs. Lily is 9 now. She has her own dreams. She wants to be a marine biologist, or a painter, or possibly both. And when she tells me about them, I don't say that's impractical or maybe later. I say, tell me more. Because I learned that the most American thing in the world isn't success. It's permission. Permission to want something for yourself. Permission to take up space with your own desires. Permission to be a work in progress. And that permission doesn't come from the government or your boss or your husband. It comes from looking at a blank space and deciding to draw something, anything, just for you. In the next section, I'll tell you about the fight that almost ended my marriage, the one where my husband said we need space and I heard I want a divorce, and how 2 words almost destroyed everything we built. The fight that almost ended our marriage. I want to tell you about the night I packed a suitcase and almost left my husband forever. Not because he cheated, not because he hit me, not because of money or lies or any of the big dramatic reasons you see in movies. I almost left because he said 3 words that I completely misunderstood. I need space. In my culture, those words mean one thing and one thing only: I want to break up. There is no other interpretation. When a husband tells his wife he needs space, she calls her mother, she calls her sisters, she starts dividing the furniture in her head. Space means distance. Distance means separation. Separation means divorce. That's what I heard when Mark came home from work one Tuesday, sat down on the edge of our bed, and said, "Lena, I love you, but I need some space." The weeks before had been hard. I was in the middle of my writing project, going to coffee shops, recording my voice, staying up late to finish a story. Mark had been supportive at first. But then he started getting quiet. He stopped asking about my day. He ate dinner in front of the TV instead of at the table. He said he was fine, and now I knew what that meant. He wasn't fine. He was pulling away. So when he finally said those 3 words, my brain didn't process them as a request. It processed them as a verdict. I didn't ask questions. I didn't say, what kind of space? For how long? I just stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled out my old suitcase, the one I had brought from my home country 10 years ago. Dusty and half-broken. Mark looked confused. "What are you doing?" he said. "You want space," I said, my voice shaking. "I'll give you space. I'll go to a hotel." "What?" "No. That's not what I meant." But I wasn't listening. Because in my mind, the script was already written. Husband says space. Wife leaves. Marriage ends. I had seen this movie before, not in America, but back home, where space was always a euphemism for goodbye. I threw clothes into the suitcase. Pants, shirts, socks, anything I could grab. Lily heard the noise and came to the doorway. "Mommy? Where are you going?" Her voice broke me. But I couldn't stop. I had already decided that I was protecting her from a worse pain later. If Daddy wanted space, better to leave now than to drag it out. Mark grabbed my arm. "Lena, stop. You're not listening. I need space. I need an hour to myself after work. That's it. 1 hour. I don't want you to leave. I want you to let me sit in the garage and breathe before I come inside." I froze. A pair of socks dangling from my hand. What? I've been working 12-hour days, he said. I come home, and you want to talk about your stories, and the kids are screaming, and I haven't had one single minute to transition. I need 20 minutes. 30. Alone. That's all I meant. I didn't mean I want a divorce. I stared at him. Then I looked at the suitcase. Then I started laughing, not because it was funny, but because I had almost destroyed my marriage over a translation error. A cultural translation error. Because in American marriage vocabulary, I need space is not a threat. It's a request for breathing room. It's like saying, I need to charge my battery. It has nothing to do with love or commitment. Some of the happiest couples I know give each other space every single day. One husband plays video games for an hour after work. One wife goes for a run alone. They don't love each other less. They love each other enough to know that constant togetherness kills affection. But I didn't grow up with that. In my culture, married couples are supposed to do everything together. Space means something is wrong. Distance means danger. Needing time alone means you don't want to be with your spouse. And no one had ever told me otherwise. That night, after I unpacked my suitcase and Lily went back to bed, Mark and I had the longest conversation of our marriage. I told him, when you say I need space, I hear I don't love you anymore. He told me, when you cling to me the second I walk in the door, I feel trapped. That doesn't mean I want to leave. It means I need to pee and take off my shoes before I can be present. We laughed. But we also cried. Because we realized we had been speaking two different languages, not English in my native language, but the language of emotional needs. Mark needed solitude to recharge. I needed connection to feel safe. And neither of us had ever said that out loud. The next day, we made a new rule. When Mark comes home from work, he gets 30 minutes in the garage. He listens to a podcast, he tinkers with his tools, he does nothing. No talking, no questions, no kids. After 30 minutes, he comes inside and he is fully present. Dinner together. Stories about our days. No phones. In return, I get Saturday mornings at the coffee shop. No guilt, no checking in, no when will you be back. Just 4 hours to write, to think, to be Lena instead of mom or wife. At first, it felt wrong. The first time Mark went to the garage, I sat in the kitchen feeling abandoned. My chest was tight. My brain whispered, he doesn't love you. He's hiding from you. But I remembered the suitcase. I remembered how close I came to leaving. And I decided to trust the process. I set a timer for 30 minutes. When it went off, Mark came inside, kissed my forehead, and said, okay. I'm here now. Tell me about your story. And he listened. Really listened. Not because I had demanded it, but because he had filled his own tank first. That's the thing about space that my culture never taught me. It's not rejection. It's preparation. It's someone saying, I want to show up for you, but I can't do that if I'm empty. Now, 3 years later, the garage rule is sacred. The kids know that when daddy is in the garage, they don't knock unless someone is bleeding. And on Saturday mornings, Mark takes the kids to the park, and I sit in my coffee shop corner with my notebook, and I write. Our marriage isn't perfect. We still fight. We still misunderstand each other. But we haven't had a suitcase moment since. Because now, when Mark says I need space, I hear I love you enough to ask for what I need. And when I say I need you to listen, he hears I trust you with my heart. That's the American marriage secret that no one tells you. Love isn't about never needing space. Love is about creating a language together where space doesn't mean goodbye. It means I'll be right back. And then actually coming back. Every single time. In the next section, I'll tell you what I learned about the 3 most misunderstood words in America, I love you, and why my husband took 5 years to say them in a way I finally believed. What I love you really means in America. Here is the most confusing thing I have ever encountered in American culture. People say I love you like they say have a nice day. My husband says it when he leaves for work, when he hangs up the phone, when he passes me the salt. My mother-in-law says it at the end of every voicemail. My daughter's teacher signed an email with love, Ms. Rachel. Love? To a student's parent? In my home country, you say I love you only to a very small circle, your spouse, your children, maybe your mother if you are extremely close. You do not say it to coworkers, neighbors, or your child's teacher. That would be bizarre. Embarrassing. Almost inappropriate. So for the first 5 years in America, I thought Americans were either insincere or emotionally shallow. How can you love someone you barely know? How can I love you mean anything if you throw it around like confetti? But then I noticed something strange. In all those years, Mark had never said I'm proud of you. Not once. I aced my citizenship test. He said, that's great, babe. I got a promotion at work. He said, awesome. I finished my first short story, 10 pages, the hardest thing I had ever written in English. I handed it to him, my heart pounding. He read it, smiled, and said, nice job, Lena. Not, I'm proud of you. Just nice job. And that absence started to hurt more than I wanted to admit. Because in my culture, I love you is rare, but I'm proud of you is everything. It's how parents acknowledge their children's struggles. It's how spouses honor each other's growth. It's the phrase that says, I see how hard you worked, and you matter. Mark said I love you every day, but he never said those 3 other words. And after a while, I started to believe he wasn't proud of me. That my English was still not good enough. That my stories were silly. That I was a disappointment who just happened to be lovable, like a pet you love even though it can't do tricks. The breaking point came at Lily's kindergarten graduation. She had struggled all year with reading, English was her first language, but she was shy and anxious. But she had worked so hard, and at graduation, she read a whole sentence by herself, I like the blue sky. The crowd clapped. I was crying. Mark hugged her and said, I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. I froze. He knew those words. He just never said them to me. That night, I confronted him. You told Lily you were proud of her. Why have you never said that to me? Mark looked genuinely confused. I tell you I love you all the time, he said. That's not the same, I said. Love is automatic. Pride is earned. You're proud of Lily because she struggled and succeeded. You're never proud of me. He sat down heavily. Lena, that's not true. I'm incredibly proud of you. You moved to a new country, learned a new language, built a life, raised 2 kids, and you're writing again. I'm more proud of you than anyone I know. Then why don't you say it? Because, he paused. Because I thought you knew. That's when I realized the second biggest cultural difference about love in America. Americans often assume that I love you covers everything. Love includes pride. Love includes admiration. Love includes gratitude. They don't feel the need to say each separate emotion because love is the big umbrella. But in my culture, love and pride are different currencies. You can love someone and not be proud of them. You can be proud of someone and not love them. And if you only say I love you without ever saying I'm proud of you, the love starts to feel like pity. Like obligation. Like something you say because you have to, not because you see the person in front of you. I explained this to Mark. I said, when you tell Lily you're proud of her, you are giving her a gift that will last her whole life. When you only tell me you love me, I hear you're fine, but not exceptional. He listened. He didn't defend himself. He just said, okay. I hear you. I'll try. And he did. The next week, I finished another story, a longer one, about the supermarket crying incident. I read it aloud to him. When I finished, he looked at me for a long moment and said, Lena, I'm proud of you. Not because the story is perfect, it's not, and you know that. But because you wrote it. You didn't give up. That's who you are, and I'm proud to be married to her. I cried. Again. But this time, the tears were different. They were the tears of someone who had finally been seen in the right language. That night, I started paying attention to how other Americans used I love you. My friend Sarah said it to me after I helped her move a couch. I didn't flinch. I said it back. Because I finally understood, in America, I love you can mean I appreciate you, I enjoy your company, you matter to me, or your family. It's not a blood oath. It's not a marriage contract. It's a warmth. A connection. A way of saying you are not alone. And once I stopped demanding that I love you carry the weight of my entire cultural history, it became lighter. Freer. More honest, actually. Because I do love Sarah. Not like I love Mark or Lily, but a real love, the love of someone who showed up when I needed help. That love deserves a word. And the word is love. So now, I say it more often. To my neighbor who brings my mail when I'm sick. To the barista who remembers my order. To my boss Karen when she stays late to help me fix a mistake. And every time I say it, I mean it. Not deeply, not forever, not with the intensity of a mother's love. But with the simple truth of I see you, and I'm glad you exist. Meanwhile, Mark has learned to say I'm proud of you more often. It's not natural for him, his family never said it either. But he practices. And every time he says it, I feel a little more solid. A little more real. We have a new rhythm now. He says I love you every morning. I say, I love you too. And once a week, usually on Sunday nights, he looks at me and says, you know, I'm really proud of you. Sometimes he lists the reasons. Sometimes he doesn't. It doesn't matter. What matters is that he learned my emotional language, just like I learned his. That's what marriage in America taught me. Love isn't about speaking the same native tongue. It's about being willing to learn a second one. In the next section, I'll tell you how slow English, literally speaking more slowly, more deliberately, saved our home when nothing else could. And why speed is the enemy of understanding. How slow English healed our home. You would think that after all those lessons, the supermarket tears, the dinner table wars, the almost divorce over I need space, I would have figured out the secret to communication. But the secret wasn't what I said. It was how fast I said it. Because for years, I believed that speaking English well meant speaking English quickly. Fast equals fluent. Slow equals foreign. That's what I thought. So I rushed. I tripped over my words. I swallowed my syllables. I tried to match the machine gun pace of my American coworkers, and every time I failed, I felt stupid. But here's the thing that saved my marriage, my parenting, and my sanity. The opposite is true. Slow English is not weak English. Slow English is careful English. Slow English is the difference between a fight that lasts 3 hours and a conversation that lasts 3 minutes. The realization came during yet another argument with Mark, this time about money. We were in the kitchen, both exhausted, both defensive. He said something about our savings account. I heard something about me being irresponsible. My heart started racing. My face got hot. And then, instead of yelling back in my broken, fast, panicked English, I did something different. I stopped. I took a breath. And I said, very slowly, Mark. I want to understand you. But I need you to say it again. Slower. He looked surprised. Then he slowed down. He repeated his sentence, not like he was talking to a child, but like he was talking to someone who actually wanted to hear. And this time, I understood. He wasn't blaming me. He was worried. Two completely different things. In my fast, fearful brain, I had translated we need to watch our spending into you are failing as a wife. But when he said it slowly, I heard the worry underneath. The care. The we instead of you. That night, I proposed a new rule for our marriage. When either of us is upset, we have to speak at half speed. No rushing. No interrupting. No finishing each other's sentences. Just slow, deliberate, almost lazy English. Mark agreed, mostly because he was tired of fighting. And the first week was hilarious. We sounded like robots. I am feeling frustrated because you left the dishes, but something strange happened. The slower we spoke, the less angry we felt. Because anger needs speed. It needs momentum. It needs those quick, sharp words that cut before the brain can catch up. When you force yourself to speak slowly, you give your logical brain time to re-engage. You ask yourself, is this worth a fight? Is this true? Is this kind? And half the time, the answer was no. I started applying slow English to everything. With Lily, when she was throwing a tantrum because I said no to cookies before dinner, I used to yell back fast, frustrated, matching her energy. Now, I kneel down, look her in the eye, and say in a very slow, very quiet voice, Lily. I hear that you want a cookie. But dinner is in 20 minutes. Would you like to help me set the table? 9 times out of 10, she stopped crying. Not because I was magical, but because my slowness forced her to slow down too. With my boss Karen, I stopped rushing through my explanations when I made a mistake. Instead of a fast, jumbled apology, I would say, Karen. I made an error. Here is what happened. Here is how I will fix it. Slow. Clear. Each sentence a separate step. She started trusting me more, not less, because slow English sounded like confidence. The real test came when my mother visited from overseas. She doesn't speak much English, but she wanted to communicate with Mark directly, no translation. They sat at the kitchen table, and Mark spoke to her in painfully slow, simple English. I am happy you are here. My mother smiled. Me too. It was the longest conversation they had ever had. 3 words each. But it was real. No misunderstandings. No awkward silences. Just 2 people respecting the limits of language and meeting in the middle. After she left, my mother told me on the phone, "Your husband speaks very good English. Very clear." I laughed. His English is native. But to her, his slowness was not a sign of stupidity. It was a sign of respect. He slowed down because he wanted her to understand. And that desire, that willingness to be inconvenient for the sake of connection, is what made him good at English in her eyes. That's when I fully understood, slow English is not a disability. It's a choice. A generous choice. You are saying to the other person, I value your understanding more than I value my speed. And in a culture that worships fast talking, fast thinking, fast everything, that choice is radical. It's also scientifically backed. I looked it up later. The average American speaks at about 150 words per minute. But the average listener's brain processes speech at around 400 words per minute. That gap, 250 words of extra brain power, is where misunderstanding lives. Your brain gets bored, starts wandering, fills in gaps with assumptions. But when you speak slowly, say, 100 words per minute, the listener's brain has room to actually process each word. To feel each emotion. To ask clarifying questions before the moment passes. Slow English closes the gap. It makes listening an active, present act instead of a passive, half-distracted one. I started using slow English in my storytelling videos. At first, I was embarrassed. I thought viewers would click away because I wasn't as fast as the native YouTubers. But the opposite happened. People commented, "Thank you for speaking slowly. I can finally understand. This is the only channel where I don't have to rewind 10 times. You speak like a human, not an auctioneer." That's when I realized that the entire language learning industry has it backwards. They push speed. Fluency equals fast. But fluency doesn't mean fast. Fluency means being able to say what you mean in a way that others can understand. And sometimes, the most fluent thing you can do is pause. Is breathe. Is say one word at a time until the other person nods. Now, I teach my kids the same thing. When Lily is frustrated that her brother won't listen, I tell her, say it slower. Say it so slow that he has no excuse not to hear. And she does. And he listens. Because speed is often just anxiety wearing a mask. And when you take off the mask, when you force yourself to be slow, you're not just speaking English. You're speaking peace. Our home is quieter now. Not silent, never silent with 2 kids, but the fights are shorter. The misunderstandings are fewer. And when they happen, one of us inevitably says, "Wait. Say that again. Slower." And we do. And the world doesn't end. In fact, it usually gets better. That's the lesson I want every English learner to hear. You don't need to be fast. You need to be clear. And clarity comes from courage, the courage to take up time, to use space between words, to trust that the person listening will wait. Because the ones who won't wait? They were never going to understand you anyway. The ones who wait? They're your people. And they will love your slow English more than any fast, perfect, fake version of you. In the next section, I'll tell you about the Christmas I stopped pretending, the day I finally stopped trying to be an American and started just being myself. The Christmas I stopped pretending. Of all the American holidays, Christmas terrified me the most. Not because of the presents or the food or even the awkward family gatherings. Christmas terrified me because it required me to perform a version of myself that did not exist. For 11 months of the year, I could hide. I could say I'm fine when I wasn't. I could smile when I was sad. I could speak slow English and avoid the hard conversations. But Christmas? Christmas demanded joy. Loud, performative, Norman Rockwell joy. And I did not have that kind of joy. I had the quiet joy of a finished story, the tired joy of children finally asleep, the complicated joy of a marriage that survived another year. But American Christmas joy is different. It's matching pajamas and cookie decorating and singing carols you don't actually know the words to. It's saying Merry Christmas to strangers at the grocery store. It's pretending that your family is functional and your budget is unlimited and your mother-in-law's casserole is delicious. For the first 8 years in America, I played the game. I bought the matching pajamas. I baked the cookies even though I burned half of them. I wrapped presents until 2 a.m. I smiled in the family photos even though my back hurt and my soul was tired. And every Christmas evening, after everyone left, I would sit alone in the kitchen and cry. Not because I was sad. Because I was exhausted from pretending. The 9th Christmas was different. That was the year after the slow English revelation, after the I need space fight, after I started writing my stories in the coffee shop. Something had shifted inside me. I no longer wanted to be a good American wife. I wanted to be a real person. The trouble started with Diane, my mother-in-law. She called in early December and said, "Lena, I'm thinking we should do Christmas at your place this year. 20 people. I'll bring the turkey. You handle the rest." The old Lena would have said, "Of course, Diane, whatever you want." The new Lena, the one who had learned to say no at the dinner table, took a breath and said, "Diane, I can't host 20 people. That's too much for me. But I can bring dessert and help you set up at your house." Silence. Long silence. Then Diane said, "Oh. Well. I suppose we could do it here." She didn't sound happy. But she didn't sound angry either. She sounded surprised. Like she had just discovered that her daughter-in-law had a spine. That was the first crack in the Christmas performance. The second crack came when Mark asked me what I wanted for Christmas. The old Lena would have said nothing or whatever you think is best. The new Lena said, "I want one thing. On Christmas morning, I want to sleep until 8 a.m. You get up with the kids. You make the coffee. You don't wake me until the coffee is ready and the kids are calm." Mark blinked. "That's it?" "That's it," I said. "I have given 8 Christmases of my body and soul. This year, I want to sleep." He laughed and said, "Deal." The third crack, the one that almost broke everything, came on Christmas Eve. Diane had invited us over for dinner before the big day. The whole family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, kids running everywhere. And Diane, in front of everyone, said, "Lena, I'm so glad you decided not to host this year. I was worried you were going to burn out." It sounded like a compliment. But I knew Diane. There was a sharp edge underneath. She was saying, "You couldn't handle it, so I had to." The old Lena would have smiled and said, "Thank you." The new Lena, the one who had been learning to tell the truth, said something else. She said, "Diane, I know you mean well. But that comment felt like a dig. I didn't say I couldn't host. I said I didn't want to. There's a difference." The room went silent. You could hear the ice cubes melting in someone's drink. Diane's face flickered, surprise, then embarrassment, then something that looked like respect. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." That was a dig. And then she did something I never expected. She stood up, walked over to me, and hugged me. In front of everyone. "I'm not used to you speaking up," she whispered. "But I like it." I almost cried. But I didn't. I just hugged her back and said, "Merry Christmas, Diane." Christmas morning arrived. Mark kept his promise. He got up with the kids at 6 a.m. He made coffee. He kept them quiet. I slept until 8:15, and when I walked into the living room, the tree was lit, the coffee was hot. And Lily handed me a present with a note that said, "For Mom, the real one." Inside was a small frame. In it, Lily had drawn a picture of me sitting at a coffee shop, writing in my notebook. Above my head, she had written in wobbly letters, "My mom has dreams now." That was when the tears came. Not the tired tears of pretending. The relieved tears of someone who had finally stopped performing. We opened presents slowly. We ate breakfast in our pajamas. We didn't go anywhere or see anyone until the afternoon. And when Diane arrived with the turkey, she didn't make any comments about the house or the kids or the food. She just said, "You look rested, Lena." "I am," I said. And for the first time, I meant it. That evening, after everyone left, Mark and I sat on the couch with the leftover pie. The kids were asleep. The house was a mess. And I said, "This was the best Christmas of my life." Mark looked surprised. "Really?" "We didn't do anything special." "Exactly," I said. "We didn't perform. We just were." He put his arm around me. "You've changed, Lena." "No," I said. "I stopped changing." That's the difference. I realized then that I had spent nearly a decade trying to become someone else, a better wife, a better mother, a better American. But all that becoming was just another word for hiding. I hid my exhaustion behind matching pajamas. I hid my loneliness behind holiday cards. I hid my real self behind a smile that said I'm fine when I was anything but. That Christmas, I stopped hiding. Not because I was brave. Because I was too tired to keep pretending. And the miracle was, no one left. Diane didn't disown me. Mark didn't divorce me. The kids didn't love me less. In fact, they loved me more, because they finally had a mom who was present instead of perfect. So here's what I want you to know, whoever you are, wherever you are in your English journey, the goal is not to become American. The goal is to become yourself, in English. In slow, imperfect, honest English. The goal is to say what you mean, even if your grammar is wrong. The goal is to set boundaries, even if your voice shakes. The goal is to stop performing joy and start living it, messy, quiet, real. That Christmas taught me something that no language school ever could. People don't fall in love with your performance. They fall in love with your presence. And presence only happens when you stop pretending. Now, every Christmas, I have one rule. I do what I actually want to do. I say no to what I don't. I sleep in. I eat the cookies I like. I hug the people I love, and I don't hug the ones I don't. And on Christmas evening, when the house is quiet, I sit in the kitchen, not crying, just resting. Because I am no longer performing for an audience of one. I am living for an audience of myself. In the final section, I'll tell you how this whole story ends, not with perfect English, but with a perfect enough life. I'm still learning, and that's the point. So here we are at the end of the story, but not really the end, because stories like mine don't end. They just keep going, messy and unfinished, like a sentence that forgot its period. Today is a Tuesday. I'm sitting in my usual coffee shop corner, the same one where I wrote most of these words. Lily is 10 now, reading chapter books in the back seat of Mark's car. Jake is 7, still scraping his knees. Still saying I'm fine when he's not, but now he adds, but I could use a band-aid because I taught him that honesty doesn't have to be loud. Mark is at work, probably in his garage office, taking those 30 minutes of space that once almost broke us. And I am here, typing slowly on my laptop, looking up every third word in the dictionary because English is still not my first language. And it never will be. That used to crush me. I used to believe that one day, after enough practice, enough exposure, enough pain, I would wake up and speak English like a native. No accent. No hesitation. No searching for the right word while the other person taps their foot. But that day never came. And after a while, I stopped waiting for it. Because I realized something that every English learner needs to hear. Your accent is not a flaw. Your mistakes are not failures. The fact that you pause, that you search, that you sometimes say pass the salt when you mean pass the pepper, that is not weakness. That is proof that you are carrying two worlds in your mouth. And that is beautiful. Last week, Lily came home from school and said, "Mom, my friend Emma asked why you talk funny." My heart stopped. "What did you say?" Lily shrugged. I said, "My mom doesn't talk funny. She talks in two languages at the same time. You only talk in one." I almost dropped my coffee. And what did Emma say? She said, "Oh, that's cool." Then we went back to playing. That's it. That's the whole thing. Children don't hear an accent as wrong. They hear it as different. And different, to a child, is interesting, not embarrassing. The shame comes later, from adults, from society, from the voice inside your head that says you don't belong here. But that voice is lying. Belonging is not about sounding the same. Belonging is about being willing to stay in the room even when you're the only one who sounds different. So no, I don't speak perfect English. I still mix up prepositions. I still say on the car instead of in the car when I'm tired. I still hear my own accent in recordings and cringe for a second before I remind myself, that accent is the sound of survival. That accent is the sound of a woman who left everything she knew, learned a new language in her 30s, raised 2 bilingual children, saved her marriage, found her dreams, and is now telling you this story in a language that was not her mother's. That's not weakness. That's a superpower. And the funny thing is, now that I've stopped trying to sound American, I actually sound more American. Because what is American culture, really? It's not hot dogs and baseball and fast speech. It's the culture of people who came from somewhere else. Every single person in this country, except the indigenous peoples, has an accent story. Their grandparents or great-grandparents sounded like me. They struggled like me. They cried in supermarkets like me. The only difference is that I'm doing it in real time, on camera, in front of you. That's why I started this channel, not to teach you perfect English, but to give you permission to learn English slowly, messily, honestly. To tell you that the goal is not to pass for a native speaker. The goal is to be understood. And you can be understood with an accent. You can be loved with an accent. You can build a life, raise a family, write a book, and make a YouTube channel, all with an accent. Yesterday, I read one of my old journal entries from my first year in America. I had written, "I will be happy when my English is perfect." I laughed out loud. Because my English is still not perfect. And I am happier than I have ever been. Not because of English. Because of everything else, the kids, the marriage, the coffee shop, the blank space that Lily filled with scribbles. The English was never the point. The English was the boat. The life was the destination. And I spent so many years polishing the boat that I forgot to look at the ocean. So here's my final lesson, the one I wish someone had told me on that first day when I cried in the supermarket. You don't need perfect English. You need a story worth telling. And you already have one. You have the story of leaving your home, of trying to belong, of messing up and getting back up, of loving someone in a second language. Of raising children who will never fully understand where you came from but will love you anyway. That story is worth telling. And you don't need a PhD in English to tell it. You just need the courage to open your mouth and let the words come, slow, imperfect, trembling. That's what this channel is for. That's what slow English practice is for. Not to make you fluent overnight, but to make you brave enough to try. To make you patient enough to listen. To make you kind enough to hear the person on the other side of the accent. Mark and I celebrated our 15th anniversary last month. We didn't do anything fancy. We went for a walk, held hands, and talked about the early years, the fights, the misunderstandings, the suitcase I almost packed. He said, "You know, I fell in love with your accent." I said, "You fell in love with me despite my accent." He shook his head. No. I fell in love with the way you said my name. The way you pronounced the R soft, like it was something precious. I had never heard my name sound that way before. And I didn't want to hear it any other way. So that's where I leave you. Not with a grammar tip or a vocabulary list, but with a truth, your accent is not a barrier. It is a fingerprint. It is the sound of your journey. And the right people, the real people, will lean in to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story. If you took nothing else from these 12 sections, take this: you are not failing at English. You are learning a new way to be human. And that takes time. That takes slowness. That takes the courage to cry in a supermarket and then get up the next day and try again. I'm still trying. I'll be trying for the rest of my life. And that's not a weakness. That's the whole point. So you made it to the end. That means you're not just a passive watcher. You're someone who actually wants to understand, not just English, but the messy, beautiful, confusing human being on the other side of the screen. And that makes you rare. Here's what I haven't told you yet. The story you just heard is only the beginning. There's a moment, about 2 years after that Christmas, when everything almost fell apart again, not because of culture, not because of language, but because I forgot my own lesson. And the way I found my way back? It involved a broken-down car, a stranger who didn't speak a word of English, and a sentence so simple that a 5-year-old could say it. That story will break you and rebuild you in 6 minutes. But I'm not putting it here. Not yet. Because I need to know if you're serious. If you want that story, the one that explains why slow English isn't just a learning method, but a way of surviving, then you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell. Because I don't make videos for everyone. I make them for the ones who cry in supermarkets. The ones who say sorry too much. The ones who feel like an alien in their own life. That's you, isn't it? I thought so. So here's your call to action, not a boring please subscribe, but a dare. Comment below with one word that describes how you felt during this story. Just one word. I'll read every single one. And the best one? I'll start my next video with it. Because this channel isn't about me. It's about us, the slow speakers, the deep feelers, the ones who take our time because we actually care about being understood. Subscribe now. The next story is already waiting. And trust me, you won't hear it anywhere else.